The story of Moses. This has got to be one of the most well-known stories in all the Bible, right? I mean, there's if you just look at all the different movies that talk about the story. I did just a quick search, and there's a number of different ways that Hollywood and even Broadway have put these stories together. I mean, we see 1923, Cecil B. DeMille made the Ten Commandments. Not to be outdone by himself, but he just decided he wanted to do it again in 1956. And we see he made another movie with the exact same title, The Ten Commandments. This was starring Charlton Heston. That's the one that we see every Easter weekend, right? The real Moses here, Charlton Heston. 1974, there was a British miniseries called Moses the Lawgiver with another great Hollywood hero, Burt Lancaster, playing Moses this time. Then there was not a lot of major projects going on, but so it wasn't until 1998. In 98, The Prince of Egypt, Jeffrey Katzenberg, one of his first movies, early movies that he made with DreamWorks, and had Val Kilmer voicing the character of Moses. Val evidently really liked playing this character of Moses because in 2006 he starred as Moses in The Ten Commandments, the musical, right? So if you can imagine, I don't know exactly how you get a musical out of that, but he did it. Then in 2007 there was an animated movie called The Ten Commandments. They're real original, the names, right? But it's The Ten Commandments with Christian Slater voicing the character of Moses. And then maybe the greatest of all, the VeggieTales Mo and the Big Exit with none other than Larry the Cucumber playing Moses' character here. So that was a big one. And then just 2 years ago, or 3 years ago now, 2014, Exodus, Gods and Kings with Christian Bale playing the role of Moses. I mean, even if you've never been in a church building in your whole life, you probably have heard of Moses. You know something about the story of Moses. You know something about the Ten Commandments, or at least have heard the name because there seems to be movies by that name every few years, right? Throughout our whole lifetimes. Now last week, we talked about how the family of Jacob, who was renamed by God Israel, how they came into Egypt under his son Joseph's protection and provision. But then we read this past week that King arose, didn't know Joseph. He was part of what we believe may have been the Hyksos people who came and took over Egypt. And so they enslaved Israel to be able to control them. And yet the population of the Israelites was growing so fast that they were outnumbering their oppressors. And so the Pharaoh comes up with the idea, you saw here a little while ago, to kill all of the baby boys that were born to Israelite families. But when that wasn't working, he decided to just go have his soldiers go and throw every baby boy they could find into the river, into the Nile. And that led to the story of Moses that was recounted here for us in our video, and that we're probably all very familiar with because of all the movies, right? But today, I want us to skip forward 80 years from that time to when Moses, having been called by God, goes to Egypt to deliver them, the Israelites, from slavery, and declares those famous words of God, "Let my people go." So there's a few things that I think we want to talk about here this morning. And the first is we're going to see, as was mentioned, the first use of the word salvation. We're going to talk about that here in just a little bit. But what we see is this, that God demonstrated his supremacy over the Egyptian gods. And we talked about the plagues. Most of us were very familiar with the plagues. If you look at this next slide, I don't know how well you can see it, but every one of these plagues, there was an Egyptian god or multiple gods that was somehow attached to what was being attacked by those plagues. There were reasons that each of these plagues existed. From the first being turning the water in the river Nile to blood. Well, the whole country basically was dependent on the water of the Nile for life. It's what made things grow in the midst of the desert. I had the privilege of going to Egypt about 2.5 years ago, and along the Nile River and spreading out from the Nile River, there's a lot of greenery, but you get outside of that, it's just death. I mean, it is just desert. There's nothing out there. So if the source of water was taken away, boy, that hit hard at them, particularly because it represented, the Nile was representative of a number of Egyptian gods and goddesses that they worshipped so that they would be able to continue to have this life-giving water for them. You see another one that really stuck out to me was that it says that at one point, one of the plagues was that everything went dark. For 3 days, said they couldn't even see one another because it was so dark. Can you think of another time in the Bible where it went really dark in the middle of the day? Yeah, while Jesus was on the cross. Remember? While Jesus was on the cross, everything went dark. Some people say, well, maybe it was, it was a solar eclipse. That God could have coordinated a solar eclipse at just that timing. That would have been nothing that God could not do. This was 3 days. No sun. Not clouds like we have today. No light. They couldn't even see each other. So each of these plagues, though, was an opportunity for Pharaoh and Egypt, by extension, to acknowledge the Lord as God above their gods. And did that work after the first plague? His own magicians were able to pull off the same trick. Same with the second plague, same with the third plague. Then it started getting over their heads. And even his magicians were saying, and advisors were saying, this is for real. This stuff is beyond us. You need to listen to what he's saying. And I'm amazed. I don't know about you, but I was amazed as I read how many times, and I'll read this, I don't know how many times, but how many times Pharaoh asked Moses, either one, would you please pray for me? Or two, he would also at times, he actually said, I have sinned and we have sinned. Please forgive us and ask God to forgive us and set us free. I mean, that sounds like really good prayers, doesn't it? But as soon as God removed the plague, his heart would get hard again. We see a perfect example of this after the seventh plague, which was when there was hail and thunder. And Pharaoh said these things. Listen to what he said. Moses said after Pharaoh had once again said, oh, please pray for us and we'll be delivered from this problem. It says in Exodus 9, verse 29. Look what it says here. Moses said to him, as soon as I have gone out of the city, I will stretch out my hands to the Lord. The thunder will cease, there will be no more hail, so that you may what? Know that the earth is whose? The Lord's. Many of those gods that we showed up here on the screen a moment ago that the plagues were attacking literally were gods of the earth and the things of the earth. And so Moses is saying that he was going to pray and that God would stop the hail because he wanted Pharaoh and the Egyptians to realize and to acknowledge that the Lord really is the God over all of the earth and all the things that they've made up other gods to try to explain away the things of the earth. But in verse 30, listen to what he says. But as for you and your servants, I know that you do not yet what?
Fear the Lord God.
Fear the Lord God. He says, I know you don't fear the Lord God. You're afraid, but you don't fear. By that it means you don't recognize He is God. Great line in the Charlton Heston version of the Ten Commandments. At the very end, you see Pharaoh sitting on his throne with his queen, and all of his armies have been wiped out in the Red Sea. And his wife is taunting him about why couldn't you do anything about Moses and all this shepherd and all these people. And he says this line, because his God is God. Sadly, we never see Pharaoh in reality come to that point. So what's going on here? Why was it not good enough? Why was it good enough to stop the plagues individually, but not to change the situation? Why do you think Pharaoh just kept on hardening his heart instead of really believing?
The Bible says God kept hardening his heart.
Well, in the end, we see towards the end it says God hardened his heart, but through most of the plagues, It says Pharaoh hardened his own heart. Now, or his heart was hardened. Either one of those two. Now, we could say that God was involved in all of that. Obviously, He's sovereign, but God was hardening his heart. Why weren't his prayers good enough?
God wanted to make an example out of him.
God wanted to make an example of him. Okay? All right.
I mean, his prayers weren't meaningful at first. He had a vested interest in keeping the Israelites in the position they were. He benefited from it, so did he really honestly want to change?
There's a very common practice down through history. Sometimes you'll see it in books or stories or even movies where someone is in a really tight spot. Life on the line, maybe. And they start making promises to God. For those of us who live in the South and love college football, sometimes it's near the end of football games. We start making promises. Oh, God, if you'll just let my team come back and win. Or even pro football, right? Didn't work for the Giants this year, but next year, right? That's what we always say. But we make these promises. Oh, God, if you'll just save me, if you'll rescue me, then I'm going to do this, or I'm going to stop doing this bad thing. And as soon as things turn around and go the way we want them to, what happens? What happens?
Forget about the promise.
Forget about the promise. Go right back to the way we've been before, right? Exactly like Pharaoh. God here, one of the things I have seen, and I hope that you were recognizing, is that through this whole situation, God is demonstrating His supremacy over the Egyptians. He's showing them, I am God. He's giving them the opportunity to believe. And we see later on, towards the end, it says that the people of Egypt, they feared God, they feared Moses. They held Moses in high esteem. They recognized that there was something real and powerful about Moses and the God that he served. But part of what is going on, too, Jay mentioned earlier, God was making an example. There, you think about this, over time, Pharaoh and the Egyptians had abused God's people, had rejected the Lord as God, and made up their own gods. They made God in their own image instead of recognizing that they were made in the image of God. And so part of what's going on here seems to be is that God is bringing about for them and allowing them to see the consequences that come from rejecting the Lord as God. For everybody. Everybody eventually who rejects the Lord suffers the consequences of it. And it's not pretty. And that's something for us to think about in light of these things, is to recognize in our own lives. Is it my focus in my life to let the Lord be God in my life? Or have I allowed idols? Now, there may not be statues to bow down to, but are there idols in my life? My work, my money, my house, my material possessions, my drive for power or fame, or any of a number of other things that get in the way of letting the Lord truly be the God of our lives. So, that's one of the things that I want us to talk about. There's another thing that I want you to see here that's very important, because we've been talking about how we see Jesus in this, and it's this, that God delivered His people from the curse on firstborn sons through Passover. Final plague was that the firstborn male child and male child of all the animals in Egypt would die on this particular night, right at midnight, as the angel of death would come through. But the Israelites were given the key for deliverance. That it required some faith. Let's read what it says happened here in Exodus chapter 12, starting in verse 3. God's talking to Moses, and he says, "Tell all the congregation of Israel that on the 10th day of this month, every man shall take a lamb according to their father's houses, a lamb for a household." Let's skip down to verse 5. "Your lamb shall be without blemish, a male, a year old. You may take it from the sheep or from the goats. And you shall keep it until the 14th day of this month, when the whole assembly of the congregation of Israel shall kill their lambs at twilight," so when the sun's going down. "Then they shall take some of the blood and put it on the 2 doorposts and the lintel of the houses in which they eat it." And then in verse 12 it says, "For I will pass through the land of Egypt that night, and I will strike all the firstborn in the land of Egypt, both man and beast, and on all the gods of Egypt I will execute judgments." That's what he's been doing all along, right? So now he just tells us about, he's executing judgments on these so-called gods of Egypt. "I am," who? "The Lord." Now, anytime you see, not every translation says this, but anytime you see in the Bible capital L, capital O, capital R, capital D, that is the way in English translations most time, that they represent the name by which God presents himself. When Moses said, when he was told to go and deliver the people of Israel out of Egypt, "If they ask me what your name is, what God are you, what should I say?" And he says, "Tell them I am sent you." His name literally means "I am," the one who always is. The best way that I have seen that we can pronounce that is Yahweh. Some people say Jehovah. I think Yahweh is probably, or Yahweh is a little bit better pronunciation. He says, "I am Yahweh. I'm it. I am the one who exists eternally." In verse 13 he says, "The blood shall be a sign for you on the houses where you are, and when I see the blood I will pass over you, and no plague will befall you to destroy you when I strike the land of Egypt." What's up with that? Why lamb? Why blood on the doorposts? Why was that the way? I heard something interesting this week. I was reading what some of the ancient Jewish rabbis have to say about this event. One of them said that after 400 years in Egypt, Israel had become part of the culture of Egypt in a lot of ways, including worship of their gods. Later on we see that the Israelites are told to put away the Egyptian gods, the foreign gods, and to worship the Lord. In fact, one ancient rabbi said that he thought maybe only 1 out of every 5 Hebrews actually left Egypt with Moses. The rest of them stayed, which I've never heard of before. But when it came to this pending plague of the death of the firstborn, we see that deliverance is based on the killing of the lamb, painting the doorposts with the blood. One ancient rabbi wrote this: "We know that the Egyptians would worship the zodiac sign of the sheep." Anybody know what a zodiac sign that is? We won't continue for knowing the zodiac sign. Yeah, it's Aries, right? To this end, they banned the slaughter, demonstrate that the Lord is God. They also see that it's a picture of Jesus. In John 1:29, we hear John the Baptist, when he sees Jesus, say, it says, "Then the next day he saw Jesus coming toward him and said, 'Behold,'" anybody know? "The Lamb of God who takes away the sin of the world." How are those two related?
He's our sacrifice.
Huh?
He's a sacrifice.
Jesus is a sacrifice, right? Okay. What are any other relationship that you see? Maybe as you were reading through this passage about Exodus and the connection with
Without
Jesus?
blemish.
Without blemish. The Bible says that Jesus was tempted in every way, just like we are, but was without sin. Anybody else?
The blood.
Hmm?
The blood.
The blood itself. What do we know about the blood of Jesus and its importance?
It washes away our sin.
Washes away our sins. Yeah. This is one of the greatest evidences of the supernatural nature of the Bible. These events that happened, there's some question, but somewhere around 1,500 years or so before Jesus' birth. And yet, all of it a part of God's plan from the very beginning. Remember, we've talked about creation. Everything was good. The fall. And since then, mankind's history has spiraled out of control. Even after God hit the reset button with Noah. Again, things spiraled out of control with evil all over the world. And we see this kind of evil that would throw babies into a river. I mean, that's serious sickness and evil. I thought it interesting also that we're talking about that kind of execution of babies on a day that our country is, or at least should be mourning the day 44 years ago that our federal government said it was okay and lawful to kill unborn babies. It's evil. And yet we see a picture of God's plan to deliver and to save. He's been telling this story all along. And if we look at these things from a whole Bible view, this should make you go, wow. You know what else should make you go, wow, about this story? Anybody remember what was going on in Jerusalem the day that Jesus was crucified? I know what holiday was being celebrated by the Jewish people.
Passover.
Passover. The same thing that God instituted on this day, in this time, to deliver His people from slavery, was the celebration of that event was the day on which Jesus was nailed to a cross, shed His blood to pay for our sins, that through faith in Him we might be saved. When we observe communion, the Lord's Supper, we're following Jesus' command to do so. Because He said to do it to remember what He's done for us. But what was the context in which He had that Last Supper where He told His followers that they should continue to observe this act? Anybody remember what they were doing?
Breaking bread.
They were celebrating the Passover meal. I can't think of any better way just to lock this in for us than to do that right now. Chris, could you bring me that tray, please? One of the other things, while we bring this up, that was interesting is that God had told the people of Israel that they should make bread, unleavened bread. And leaven makes bread rise. It takes some time. And part of the issue was that they needed to be in a hurry, get ready to leave Egypt as soon as Pharaoh said, get out of here, which he did, and which they did. But also we see in the New Testament, Jesus talks about leaven as being like sin. And so that we need to get rid of the leaven from our lives, the sin in our lives. And when we see in 1 Corinthians 11, when the Apostle Paul is talking to the church about how they should have this communion, what we often call the Lord's Supper, that they needed to check their hearts. They needed to evaluate themselves and see, is there unconfessed sin in my life? Is there leaven in my life? And I need to confess to God, trust Him to purge me of and to renew me. Anything that I need to repent of so that I can be filled with the Spirit and fully, genuinely celebrate what Jesus has done for me. Because He said to celebrate Jesus' death, the breaking of His body like this bread, and the pouring out of His blood as a payment for our sin, and yet still hold on to our pet sin, is a slap in God's face. I want all you got for me, but I'm still going to be my own God and do my own thing. So I want us to take a moment. And let's search our hearts. Jordan, I tell you what, would you play that song for us? You walk in the room, just the chorus of it. And let's just spend a few moments quiet, asking God, God, is there something in my life? Or some things in my life? Some idols, some leavening, some ongoing sin that I need to admit that it's sin and trust you to forgive me and to deliver me from that sin, from that practice. So right where you are, whether you're here or watching online, you can still be a part of this. Just talk to God. Allow Him to speak to your life. God, the Bible tells us that without the shedding of blood, there's no forgiveness of sins. It is because the Bible also tells us that the wages of sin is death. And that life is in the blood. So there has to be a payment of life to satisfy the debt of our sin against you. But we thank you that you love us so much. Yes, you sent Jesus, who was without sin, to pay our debt. To give His life, to shed His blood. That our debt might be paid in full. That's what "it is finished" means. Debt is paid in full. Lord, even those of us who trusted you, your grace through Jesus, we still struggle with sin. And I trust that even now that you are convicting us of sin, you're showing us, you're pulling back the curtains to show us what's in our own hearts. And as you do, Lord, I hope and trust we're admitting those things are sin and asking and allowing you just to get the garbage out and fill us with the fullness of who you are. We thank you, Lord, for this opportunity to be reminded of the price you've paid for us through Jesus. Jesus said that the bread represented his body. So we have this bread that will represent his body. We have in these cups that fruit of the vine that represents his blood. So as you do this, I'm going to pass it around. I want each of you to go ahead and take one of each. Share it with the person next to you. I'll tell you what, I better just do it this time. And then we'll partake together. If you just aren't there right now, spiritually you're not sure that you're ready for that, that's okay. Passover lamb. be slaughtered. Jesus says, "It's my body, which is broken for you. Do this to remember me." In the same way he took the cup. He says, "This is representative of my blood. It's initiating a new covenant, a new way to have a relationship with God. Not by keeping the rules that you can't perfectly keep, but through faith in what Jesus has done to make you right with God." He says, "Do this to remember me and what I've done." I wonder if anybody has something that God's been speaking to your heart this week about what we talked about, what we've read. One of the things that I'm hoping to encourage is the understanding that God wants to speak to us through all of us, from time to time at least.
Moses wrote Exodus, right?
Yes.
I guess what kind of intrigued me in the beginning of the books, he wrote the book, but he never really put his feelings into the book. Because in the beginning, when God came to him, I'd be scared out of. And he didn't express that. I don't think he expressed. His emotions aren't in the book as later in the New Testament when Paul's writing and the disciples are writing. You can see their feelings, but
Yeah.
Moses didn't. Moses was like direct to the point.
That's interesting. Yeah, we see that he didn't want to do it. Right, I mean, it's not the same kind of passion, perhaps, that we see in later writers.
That was interesting in chapter 12 how God goes on ahead and tells Moses that they will keep celebrating this. Keep celebrating it. Remind your children, remember, because he knows how forgetful we are.
Yeah.
That's my guess. He didn't say why.
No, God, throughout the Bible, gives us things to remember, significant events. The very reason that that going to church one time in your life is not sufficient for the rest of your life is because we need one another. We need to be reminding one another who God is, what God has said, and how to live that out. So that's part of the thing. We are remembering when we come together what He's done for us. Anybody else?
So I know I've read the story before and thought to myself, how thick-headed could Pharaoh be? I mean, I probably would have gotten the clue right around the first plague, not by the second or third. And so I'm driving down here yesterday, listening to it over the radio, and then I thought about, well, what about the personal plagues that we have? What about the society plagues that we have that we ignore? Abortion. Go on TV and listen to the medications for self-depression, but the side effect is that you may become suicidal, which I haven't figured that out yet. But anyway, how many plagues do we ignore right here in our very own day? And I guess it just kind of enlightened me a little bit to that, because I was like, for all these times that I've read the story, I've read it like a story, and then I haven't really related it to just actually nothing's new under the sun, and we have those same things. And as you go further along in the story, they talk about how they're going to the promised land, and the water gets bitter, and a tree falls into the water, right? And so it makes it sweet, right? I get that. My wife's big into essential oils and stuff like that. But then water comes out of a rock, right? And so then I was like, so how often do we not just overlook some of the miracles that happen within our own lives?
Yeah. That's
But technology has gotten us to desensitize the fact that